Our next speaker, she has served in one of the Israel Defense Forces elite intelligence units. That's quite impressive, I believe, especially considering what is happening nowadays, where IDF, of course, is involved. So she has an extensive background in research and intelligence gathering, currently working for KELA, a cybersecurity firm. Irina Nesterovsky, are you here? Yeah,
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're remote. Yeah, I was actually told that you're remotely connected, so I can see. I'm not sure if you can see me, but you can hear.
I can.
Oh, that's nice.
Hello.
All right. We have an audience. It's less than 100 people, but anyhow, so the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. This was supposed to be an in-person session, but unfortunately, I was unable to fly due to the security situation in Israel. But hopefully, you will bear with me for this remote session, and hopefully it will be useful to you. So, as presented, my name is Irina Nesterovsky. I'm the Chief Research Officer at KELA. We are a CTI company that provides its clients intelligence about threats to their organization stemming from the cybercrime underground, helps them prevent further compromise. We monitor different cybercrime platforms, such as the ones I will describe today and many more, and we collect, structure, and contextualize all of this information to provide actionable intelligence. Today, I'm going to talk about cybercrime intelligence, why should you care, and how to use it to protect your organization and investigate threat actors. Let's start with some introductory content. What is cybercrime? Cybercrime is a criminal activity that either targets or uses a computer network, or a network device. While a lot of cybercrime is focused on money gain from consumers, like account fraud, credit card theft, and so on, organizations should be aware of the threats stemming from it. Cybercrime attackers employ sophisticated business tactics to scale their operations, and they leverage a vast ecosystem where they can buy, rent, or commission services that enable their attacks. However, luckily for us, defenders can have the same visibility and exploit the same tactics to combat adversaries, but more about that later. So what is actually traded in this ecosystem? In this slide and the following, we will examine the tip of the iceberg of cybercriminal activity, in some cases using specific examples pertaining to Latvia, that organizations should know and care about. One of the most abundant things pertaining to organizations that is advertised by cybercriminals are databases, internet-hosted user databases of breached websites and companies, databases that cybercriminals compiled from other stolen data, as well as tools and software. On the screen, you can see 3 different examples for just that: a database from the Latvian government companies registrar, an SQL hack of a Latvian website, and just someone sharing a database they compiled containing Latvian email addresses and passwords, obviously identifying them by the .lv TLD. What else? Threat actors are obtaining and selling credentials to various external perimeter tools that allow access into companies' networks, and we'll discuss all about that later as well. They then attempt to sell it, as can be seen in the examples on the screen. On the right, you can see an actor selling access to a Latvian airline sector company, luckily that one is in English, through its VPN. Another example is a partnership announcement on the left from a data leak actor Everest, where they clearly announce that they're looking for corporate access. Again, we'll discuss all about that a bit later. One of the top threats to organizations nowadays are ransomware attacks and data theft, either accompanying it or occurring regardless. Ransomware actors are publishing the names of their victims on dedicated websites, trying to shame and threaten their victims into paying ransom, as you can see on the left. In other cases, actors will sell or openly share information from or data from companies they managed to breach, as you can see on the right. Finally, for this presentation only, as there are multiple other possible threats, hacktivism and faketivism. Threat actors who claim to operate due to ideology target organizations in countries that are allegedly positioned against their ideology. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, a big movement of both pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian hacktivism, though of course more pro-Russian, emerged, with some actors suspected to actually act on behalf of the Russian government. Those actors claim DDoS attacks and share proof screenshots, as you can see on the screen, aimed against Latvian organizations. So they would claim they have attacked websites, they would share check host reports showing that a website was not available at a time, and this is just a nice illustration of a bear because they're Russians and they embrace the image. What else? If we keep in the key of things that can be interesting to defenders and security researchers, then this is what you can see here on the screen that is also shared, sold, and traded in the cybercrime underground. There are compromised websites, servers, and emails that can be used to launch different attacks and to mask the original intent or the original source of the actors. Of course, huge amounts of fraud, because this is where money is: accounts, checks, credit cards, personal information, multi-factor bypass for fraud purposes. You have malware that is either ready to use or scripts to use it, related services, so obfuscation, encrypting services. We also see discussions about security bypasses, vulnerability discussions, and actual POCs discussions, 0 days, and much, much more. And we haven't even touched the whole topic of drugs, weapons, and so on. Now to the next question: where does this all happen? In the past, you would hear the word dark web or darknet everywhere, but that's hardly true anymore. And here's the reason why this presentation is not actually called CTI from the darknet. At KELA, we've been following cybercriminals for over a decade, and we've seen them evolve from lurking in closed and not so closed forums to using every means available, such as instant messaging platforms and even social media. And you can hardly call Telegram darknet, right? Well, at least for now. Now to the question of why. We touched the fact that cybercrime is a business, and so the motivation is financial, but we have also seen other types of actors joining in on the fun, like the hacktivism that I mentioned. And we also know that those actors use the ecosystem to either obtain their tools or advertise their success. I showed you several examples of what kind of tools and information is shared and sold in the cybercrime underground. And now I want to focus on one specific threat that's on the rise and is threatening organizations worldwide. And we'll demonstrate the what, where, and why that should be relevant to you. Infostealers. First, an infostealer is a type of malware that, when delivered, is stealing various data stored on the infected machine, that is, computer, smartphone, etc. Mainly, it is saved in internet browsers. Those are login credentials, so usernames, passwords, cookies, cryptocurrency wallet information, autocomplete information from when you fill in your address, for example. This data is stolen and then gets sent to the attacker's command and control center. According to IBM's report for this year, the access vector of valid accounts has become one of the most favored initial access vectors for cyber attacks, topping their list. Infostealers are actually a way for cybercriminals to get their hands on those valid accounts and use them for further attacks or monetization by selling it to other actors. So what scenario do we usually see? There's initial infection with infostealing malware that exploits both human and infrastructure weaknesses and ends up in stealing sensitive credentials and other information. Even if an employee has passed all the trainings, knows not to download suspicious stuff, they can let their child download a Minecraft cheat to a work laptop and get infected with the malware. Then the stolen credentials are either used directly by the attacker to infiltrate a network or are sold, shared for a fee, or even freely to other threat actors. In some cases, those can be even nation-state actors. The sale of these credentials and other info, so-called blogs, on underground platforms facilitates a secondary intrusion where different actors may exploit the same access point for different malicious activities. And now let's see where credentials are put for sale and share on cybercrime platforms. I saved you a whole history lesson on the evolution of logged offerings, so let's talk about what happens today. Cybercriminals nowadays have several main channels to monetize infostealer compromised credentials, which are usually sold or shared in the form of a file with all the information from the infected computer, and this is called a bot. These include all the way private sales or posts on cybercrime forums where data can be offered and sold directly to a buyer, automated markets which function like e-commerce platforms for stolen data, subscription services that offer large volumes of credentials for a recurring fee, and URL login password files that aggregate information from many compromised machines. Now let's talk a bit more about each one of them and their pros and cons for threat actors. Cybercrime forums and private sales are sometimes key venues for selling unique, high-value credentials. Transactions often occur through direct messages, which allows for a more tailored and less detectable exchange. However, this method is less scalable as it relies heavily on trust between buyers and sellers. Automated markets operate on dedicated websites where attackers can browse, select, and purchase credentials with minimal interaction. These platforms offer a higher level of scalability and anonymity, making them a preferred choice for many cybercriminals. However, the downside for them may be that they need to buy each bot separately. The ease of use and accessibility of these markets have significantly contributed to the proliferation of info-steal and malware. Over time, there were a few major players in the market, but now only one remains, named Russian market. There are some other players, but overall it's monopoly. However, it doesn't stop threat actors because when such markets were developing and competing, there was another type of platforms growing in parallel, and we're talking about what we call clouds of logs. Clouds of logs are subscription services that provide attackers with access to vast amount of stolen credentials at a relatively low cost. The services are typically hosted on platforms like Telegram, allowing cybercriminals to access and update their data continuously. It doesn't require to buy bots one by one as in markets, and the buyers can just see all full credentials for all posted bots. This method of distribution is especially dangerous because it allows attackers to scale their operations quickly. Just for $40 in 1 week, one can receive credentials to at least 20,000 compromised services. And finally, ULP, called so by cybercriminals, and we use that as well, URL login password files can be considered another monetization channel. These are aggregations of stolen logs that are spread across different mediums. These files often contain full credentials and are available for a low price or even for free. On average, we saw such files containing over 300,000 lines, potentially ending up in a similar amount of compromised credentials. On the screenshot, you can see a file with 1.5 million lines in one file alone. However, those files usually lack the complete bot data, which can make them less valuable, so no cookies, but still potent in the wrong hands. To understand the scale of this threat, let's take a look at how many compromised machines data only from markets and subscription services we processed last year to extract credentials, obviously to protect our clients. Each month, you can see it's around 500,000 to 1 million compromised machines coming from various sources and available to cybercriminals as well. And if we want to understand the amount of credentials to be extracted from these bots, meaning one pair of login password and associated URL, it's more than 25 million each month. This is not to illustrate that we're good in collecting intelligence. This is to show that cybercriminals can have the same visibility and the same access as well. Now that we discussed all the places and formats cybercriminals can obtain the info-steal or malware logs in, the next question is what threat actors do with all this information and why you should care. Well, some of them will target individuals for their Netflix, Amazon accounts. Others will try to steal bigger money and target financial accounts, banks, crypto wallets. Those who target the big fish would go hunting for access to corporate resources, and we see established procedures for identifying valuable access. First, a quick overview on what's out there. We know that info-stealers frequently expose corporate accounts alongside personal ones, either because a work laptop is infected or because people access corporate systems from their personal computers. Once these accounts are exposed, they can be exploited to gain deeper access into an organization's network, potentially leading to a major breach. You can see here an overview for the Baltics for the last year, a lot of ADFS, email, CMS credentials that were stolen. You can also see here a specific example of a compromised credential from just one machine with an access to an ADFS resource in Latvia with full username and password available to whoever has access to this information. Third-party services like Okta and Slack are also at risk. As more organizations rely on these external providers for day-to-day operations, attackers increasingly target them as a backdoor into corporate networks. Again, what you see on the screen is just a small snapshot of Okta accounts stolen by info-stealing malware. We know that threat actors are constantly on the lookout for credentials to corporate resources, as I showed in the beginning of this presentation. On hacking forums, we see posts from cybercriminals specifying their needs, such as particular strings in compromised URLs, to pinpoint these valuable accounts. You can see here a few examples in the screenshot. You have Dana NA for Pulse Secure VPN, you have variations of the word VPN, and so on. And actually reviewing the exposed URLs and researching what platform they belong to is what enables us to actually classify the corporate accesses on the screenshot you saw before. Actors are also specifying the countries in which target organizations should be located, with the thought of more wealthy countries will be able to provide more monetization opportunities. So you can see here the geo, USA, Australia, Canada, and so on. And once compromised, obviously these accounts can provide a gateway to an organization's most sensitive data. To understand a bit more on what is interesting to threat actors, we gathered such posts in the recent half year and found that the top 5 resources mentioned by threat actors include, not surprisingly, VPN and remote desktop solutions from various vendors. And this is obviously something that's worth keeping in mind when implementing these solutions. So what happens next when these sensitive credentials are acquired by other threat actors? Let's discuss which attacks they use them in. The best and most frightening example is to follow a supply chain of ransomware as a service, illustrating how one attacker does not need to be skilled at all stages of the attack if they have access to cybercrime platforms, services, and partners. Ransomware operations actually frequently start with info-stealer logs, so it all starts with opportunistic attacks. Then the credentials that were acquired through info-stealing malware can be obtained and matured by initial access brokers, actors who will look for sensitive credentials in these logs, access the network, check the company revenue and sector, escalate privileges, and put them for sale. Finally, ransomware affiliates buy and use stolen credentials to gain initial access to a network, move laterally, escalate privileges, and deploy ransomware. Ransomware operators and affiliates will then share profit if they receive ransom from the victims. A recent example, in February 2024, cybercriminals used stolen credentials to access a Citrix portal of United States healthcare services provider Change Healthcare, with that portal specifically lacking multi-factor authentication. The attackers spent 9 days inside the compromised network stealing data before finally deploying ransomware. There's a full testimony of the CEO describing all the attack chain if you want to read it. Interestingly, credentials to a Citrix remote portal were actually leaked or sold on cybercrime platforms around this time. Unfortunately, no investigation was still published on how the credentials were acquired in the beginning, but it is believed info-stealing malware could be the cause. There's another confirmed case you've all probably heard about. While not a ransomware, it's a major case of personal data theft. In April this year, an actor used stolen credentials to access customer accounts on Snowflake, a multi-cloud data storage platform. The attack impacted at least 165 companies, with initial access vector traced back to info-stealing malware, malware logs sold on cybercrime platforms. You can see here accounts stolen in other cases, belonging to Ticketmaster access to their Snowflake instance, and definitely Ticketmaster was one of the biggest companies affected by this. And then we saw several actors involved in the operation attempting to sell and leak these companies' data. I could go on in different cases, but unfortunately today we have limited time. But those are just 2 examples that show how a big compromise can start with just one credential leaked on cybercrime platforms. Now what? Now that we saw different types of cybercrime and focus on one of them, how is knowing all of this useful? If we're talking about the info-stealing threat, this is the bottom line for network defenders. Unfortunately, an initial infection may be inevitable. However, a larger compromise can be prevented with the right approach. By focusing not only on the inner perimeter, meaning security training, multi-factor authentication, antivirus solution, endpoint protection platforms, but also on the external perimeter, meaning monitoring for assets, compromised credentials, we can develop better defenses and prevent secondary intrusion. So you will know that something happened and you will be able to prevent it from further attacking your network. How about everything else I showed? Let's discuss a few places where knowing what happens in the cybercrime underground can come in handy. First, discover what's already out there about your company or about your organization to prevent secondary intrusion or compromise. Monitor and detect when new threats arise targeting your company or stemming from initial compromise. Be aware of your attack surface, your external perimeter allowing access to your network, and what tools actors have to break it or to breach it. Understand attack vectors and stay on top of the cybercrime landscape, how cybercriminals operate, which points of entry are favored, which vulnerabilities are discussed. Monitor for development of actors' TDPs to make sure you're aware of ongoing schemes and threats. TPRM processes, be aware of the threats posed to your partners and vendors, so third-party management. And finally, fraud threats. For fraud research, are your clients an easy target? Are threat actors discussing them? Are they discussing your platforms as being an easy target to circumvent and to breach or to bypass? There's one more use case for the security industry. For example, InfoStealer data isn't just useful for defense, it can also be a powerful tool for research. Analyzing this data allows us to identify and track threat actors, sometimes even leading to their de-anonymization and disrupting cybercriminal operations. Threat actors are people too, and they sometimes fall victim to the very malware they deploy. By analyzing InfoStealer data from infected machines, we can uncover personal details that leads to the identification of these criminals, as already mentioned. For example, while researching the hacktivist group TYG team, KELA pivoted from an email address associated with the actor's YouTube profile. Very, very open source. I know it's a bit fuzzy, but it says Sami Ali 7762@yahoo.com from Yemen. Using these details, KELA found an email with the same local part, so you can see here Sami Ali 7762, and another domain likely associated with the same individual in autofill tabs of a Yemeni computer infected by the red line stealers. So all of this information was stolen by an InfoStealer malware. Several additional emails were discovered on the infected machine, and the primary email associated with this computer, the alwaya.200gmail.com, was actually linked by us through OSINT to a phone number that was exposed in the 2020 Facebook data breach. And as a result, we found a Facebook profile of a man from Yemen, likely related to the hacktivist group. And research can be not only about identifying threat actors that you're already hunting, it can be also used to find cybercriminals of interest, because when individuals are infected by InfoStealers, their online activities can reveal much about their intentions. By examining the sites they visit, we can identify involvement in illegal activities such as piracy and cybercrime activity, child pornography, sale of drugs and weapons, and then further research their online traces to find these individuals. For example, on the screen, this is a list, a not exhaustive list of users who were accessing the leaks-oriented breach forums and who were also infected at one point by an InfoStealer malware. Again, this is just a few use cases meant to show it can be used not only for protection, but active hunting. So, in conclusion, the rise of InfoStealer malware represents a significant challenge, but with the right approach, we can fight it and use it for our good. To conclude again, InfoStealers represent a growing and significant threat to organizations worldwide, particularly due to their role in harvesting valid credentials to corporate resources that can be exploited in further attacks. The cybercrime ecosystem has evolved to facilitate the widespread sale and distribution of InfoStealer logs. Really, we've seen this growing in crazy amounts of percentage, allowing even less skilled actors to gain access to critical corporate resources. The stolen credentials from InfoStealer are indeed used in a variety of attacks, including ransomware operations. However, we know that by understanding and exploiting the same tactics used by cybercriminals, defenders can enhance their visibility and protective measures, ultimately reducing the risk of a successful attack. And finally, leveraging infostealer data for defense and threat actor hunting can provide valuable intelligence to prevent breaches and identify malicious actors. In addition, having access to intelligence from cybercrime sources can help organizations to stay ahead of the game, or at least know what they're up against. Now I'm ready to answer any questions if you have any, and thank you for having me here again.
Thank you, Irina. Thank you. I hope you can hear people clapping for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And it's good that we have the technology that even though, I mean, all the obstacles considering the situation in Israel, you can still participate in the conference, so it's good.
Definitely, definitely, yes. And thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
Yeah. In Latvia, questions from the audience, they're limited, and probably we've spent them all this morning. Just kidding, but I wonder, what happened with the guy in Yemen?
Unfortunately, nothing, because we just identified actually another one. I actually wanted to include this as an example, but 2 Yemen guys, it's just too suspicious. But unfortunately, I don't think anybody actually cares about Yemen guys. Maybe if someone will care and they would actually have money to travel somewhere, maybe they can get arrested, picked up by someone. But unfortunately, at this stage, I guess they continue to be active, and the best we can do is kind of be prepared for whatever attacks they can conduct, and protect ourselves at least.
I see. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day.